Hello everyone. I just want to jump in here really quick and give an intro to this video. I just want to give a heartfelt thank you again to each and every one of you who take your time to watch the videos and interact with me and what have you here on YouTube. It's my ordained responsibility to share my testimony as to how I and why I came into faith in Jesus Christ and left this religion behind me, and that's what my purpose is here on this YouTube channel. All hell has come against me. The past month, trying to stop me, trying to discourage me, trying to shut this down. I confess that I have a problem staying focused on one thing at a time. So I type every one of these the videos, the content, and what have you. I voice type it into a teleprompter, and I read it as I'm in front of the camera, because it helps me stay on the subject. I don't like running down rabbit trails and things like that. You can tell when I'm using a teleprompter and when I'm not. It's fairly obvious. I'm just being transparent and confessing that I use it. Well, anyway, my dad was really bad about running down rabbit trails and things when he would give the talks and all that. So what I do is I just choose to use a teleprompter because, like I said, it keeps me on the subject matter. Well, I had been using an Android tablet for that, and the tablet has got a large screen on it. Well, upon working on this video, that tablet decided to give up the ghost and go be with Jesus. So I don't have my tablet anymore. So I had to use my phone, which is much smaller. I have the same teleprompter app on my phone. It's much smaller and it's so much harder to see. So be patient with me as you watch the video. I'm struggling to see some of the words or what have you. Just please try to stay focused on the subject matter. In this video, what I'm doing is sharing about the dream that I had. I've said several times in a few of the other videos that I had a dream when I was 10 years old, and I feel like it was prophetic in nature, and I believe it's coming to fruition right now in my life. So I share that dream that I had when I was 10 years old because I believe it's a very important part of my testimony as a Christian. So I want you to hear that dream. That's what this video is dedicated to. So we're just going to stay right there on this dream. This was around 1980 when I was about 10 years old. But nonetheless, as I was putting this video together, 2 weeks ago, I already recorded this video. And I had it ready to go, I thought that I had it ready to go. And when I pulled it into the editing software, there was about 22 files associated with the video that I had recorded, and half of them were listed as corrupt files. So I couldn't use any of it. I had to completely and totally re-record this video. So I just ask for your patience. I ask for your mercy. This kind of took me out of my comfort zone, having to use the phone as a teleprompter, like I said, because it's hard to see. It's so much smaller, but I tried. And so please just try to stay focused on the subject matter and listen to this dream as I share it with you. And then in the next video, we'll pick up around 1981, right around there, and I'm going to share some memories of my early teenage years associated with being raised a Jehovah's Witness, some things that my dad told me when I was a kid that absolutely scared the daylights out of me. He said it in front of every one of us kids one night during a book study, a Thursday night book study, a family book study. We had our little family book studies or what have you, and he made a comment one night about the United Nations and all this nonsense, and it just scared every one of us to death. It certainly didn't motivate us to want us to serve Jehovah or serve in his organization or anything like that. It just scared it scared the daylights out of us. So I'm going to pick up in the next video around that time frame, right around 1981 or what have you, and I'm going to share some more of those stories and maybe even talk about a few more of the books that he used in order to indoctrinate us. But anyway, let's go ahead and get this one started. I don't want it to be too long. Thank you again for your patience. Please just try to stay focused on the subject matter, and by all means, share your thoughts in the comment section or what have you. I'll see you in the next video. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back. This will be video number 5 in my testimony series. In video number 1, I shared in regards to my grandparents on both sides of my family. In video number 2, we discussed the possible circumstances through which my parents became Jehovah's Witnesses, and I shared a few experiences my siblings endured prior to my birth as they were being indoctrinated into the religion also. In video number 3, we picked up at the year of my birth in 1971 as I shared some of my earliest memories growing up as a Jehovah's Witness as well. In video number 4, we continued between the years of 1971 and 1979 as I did an interesting total review of the so-called Great Teacher book. We will continue with my testimony series in video number 5, and we'll start in the year of 1980, which is the year in which I turned 9 years of age. Several times over the last year, I have alluded to a particular dream I had as a young 10-year-old Jehovah's Witness kid. Considering the mindset I would have been in as a raised from birth 10-year-old Jehovah's Witness kid, it would be very easy to understand my confusion seeing myself in the latter days leading and helping people get into heaven. It just wouldn't make sense. Since only 144,000 anointed Jehovah's Witnesses can go to heaven, this could certainly leave one in a baffled state of confusion. How could Jehovah possibly use me in order to help the anointed as they are being transported into heaven? Throughout the Bible, God spoke to people in dreams and visions. To this day, God still speaks to people in dreams and visions, and He has never stopped. In this video, you will hear every detail concerning and surrounding this particular dream that I now know was prophetic in nature. In Genesis chapter 37, it was through a dream that God showed a very young Joseph that later in his life he would be elevated to a position of authority. And of course, this made his siblings jealous. Therefore, they sold him into slavery, faked his death, and eventually Joseph found himself living as a slave in the land of Egypt. Through a series of divine interventions, otherwise known as redemptive lift, Joseph eventually found himself second in command over all of Egypt. You can see the rest of this story in the book of Genesis. In the book of Daniel, as King Nebuchadnezzar had ordered the destruction of all of the wise men of Babylon, because none could interpret his dream, it was through a dream that God gave Daniel the interpretation, resulting in Daniel and his close friends being promoted to positions of authority as leaders in the land of Babylon. In Matthew chapter 1 and verse 20, God spoke to Joseph in a dream as he was instructed by an angel to take Mary as his wife, explaining that what had been conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit and that they are to name him Jesus. And Joseph is visited once more in a dream in chapter 2 verse 13 as he is warned to take Mary and the child into Egypt for their protection. In Acts chapter 16 verse 9, Paul is given a night vision in which God was instructing him to go and preach in Macedonia. In Joel chapter 2 and verse 28, God said that He would pour out His Spirit on all humanity, and then sons and daughters would prophesy, old men will have dreams, and young men will see visions. To this day, we are hearing story after story of Muslims coming to faith in Jesus, explaining that He is visiting them in dreams and visions. Many these days scoff and laugh at those claiming to have spiritual dreams. I would dare to say that their disbelief is rooted primarily in the fact that they simply have never experienced one. When one has a dream from God or a spiritual dream, they know immediately that there was something totally different about this dream in comparison to others. A spiritual dream is much clearer in that the colors are more vivid, the communication is easier to understand, and the person having the dream never forgets any of the details. Since becoming a true believer at 30 years of age, back in 2001, these types of dreams have become more frequent in my life, and I always write them down. After coming to faith and after reading Joel chapter 2 verse 28, I prayed and asked God to speak to me in dreams and visions more often. In an earlier video, I discussed my grandmother from my dad's side of the family. Her name was Layla Mae Garrison, and for the greatest part of my existence, she lived in the Birmingham, Alabama area. Due to my being raised in Pensacola as a child, I have very few memories of her. We were rarely around her due to the distance between us and the fact that we were mostly sheltered away from her because she was of the Pentecostal faith. Therefore, most assuredly, we were taught as children that she was full of demons. Being taught this about her created a fear and uneasiness within me the few times that I recall actually being in her presence. I have been told several times as a child that Grandma wanted nothing to do with the Jehovah's Witness faith, therefore she was certainly under the control of Satan himself. Grandma Layla Mae used to make beautiful quilts, or at least we were told that she was the one that made them. At some point around 1980, she sent several of these quilts as gifts to us here in Pensacola, and sure enough, one of these quilts eventually made it onto my bed. Being taught that Grandma was full of demons and that demons can attach themselves to items, I was petrified in fear every single night as I attempted to fall asleep. My appeals to my mother to remove the quilt from my bed fell on unsympathetic ears, resulting in a very intense anticipation anxiety every evening as bedtime would draw near. I just knew that at some point of the night I would wake up and see a demon standing over my bed after manifesting from one of these demonized quilts. I believe this fear and paranoia actually led to and resulted in a blessing. Stay with me, folks. As I would lay in bed at night, I was so petrified with fear that every single night I would throw the sheet and the quilt over my head, assuming it may shield me from seeing the quilt demon if it decided to manifest. I had learned at some point in my childhood that if I called on the name Jehovah in these moments, that he would always protect me. As I would lay there with my head totally buried under my sheet and quilt, I would repeat the name Jehovah over and over until eventually being rescued by the comforts of sound sleep. And of course, I would wake up relieved the next morning that nothing happened. And once again, as the evening would draw near, the fear and anticipation anxiety associated with bedtime would once again manifest, and the cycle would repeat itself over and over every single night until sleep finally rescued me. Thankfully, the quilt demon never manifested, and I never woke up to him standing over my bed. But one night after this repeated cycle of covering my head and begging Jehovah to protect me, something very interesting did happen. Sometime during the night, I had a dream that was very unique and unlike any dream that I had ever had before. Upon waking up the following morning, every single detail of this dream was fresh on my mind, and to this very day, I have never forgotten it. And although it stayed fresh in my memory, I had no clue in my young 10-year-old mind what it meant. If you have a Jehovah's Witness background, as I do, as I share this dream, you'll very easily understand my confusion as well. I would now like to share this dream with you. I need to share it because it is a very important part of my testimony. Oftentimes in the Bible, when God was preparing someone for their assignment or ministry, he would begin with that preparation very early in their lives. I am convinced as ever at 50 years old that God gave me this dream at 10 years of age in order to prepare me for my assignment that he would bring to fruition much later in my life. As I share this dream, please keep in mind that the organization taught me from birth that only 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses would go to heaven, and the rest of the witnesses, if found worthy, would inherit the earth. As the dream began, I found myself hovering in the air a short distance away from what was clearly a tower of some sort that stood approximately 20 to 30 feet tall. From my perspective, I was to the right of this tower, about 50 feet up in the air, viewing the scene from above. Due to its design, I have always described this tower as a very tall and large tripod-like structure. It was wider at the bottom than at the top. It was obviously dark outside, and the tower was illuminated by a very bright light. Although the light was the most radiant, pure white, bright light I had ever seen, it didn't hurt my eyes when I looked at it. As the light illuminated the tower, I could clearly see that a person was on top of this tower, kneeling on their left knee and looking up at the light. At the very moment that I saw the person kneeling on top of the tower, I knew that it was me. I was much older, and the scene that was unfolding was much further into my future. As I looked back up towards the bright light, I could clearly see that its source was a large, vividly lit capsule that was slowly descending down to the tower. At that moment, I realized that this tower was serving as a landing and launching pad for this capsule. This capsule would gently ascend into heaven and then gently descend back to this tower. My attention was then drawn to the base of the tower, and as the capsule got closer, I could see a very large line of people standing single file at the back of the tower, which was to my left. These people were facing the tower, and the line reached as far as my eyes could see. It was at this moment in the dream that I became aware that my assignment was to man this tower, and it was my ordained responsibility to get each of these people one by one into this brightly illuminated capsule, because God was using it in order to transport them into heaven. It was also at this moment in the dream that I became aware that the reason for getting these people into heaven was for the purpose of protecting them from a wrath that was about to come upon the earth. As the capsule descended even closer, I could clearly see that the setting of this dream was on a beach or a coastline. To the back of the tower was the line of people. To the front of the tower was a large ocean of water. I then looked up and forward, and to my amazement, as far as the eye could see, the setting was a long and winding coastline that stretched for miles and miles. I could then see that countless towers, just as the one I was kneeling on, stretched across this coastline as far as the eye could see. Each tower was manned specifically by a person appointed by God himself, and it was their individual responsibility to assist these people one by one into the capsules. I looked in amazement as these capsules, so numerous that I couldn't put a number on them, repeatedly ascended and descended to and from these towers. I remember in the dream that I was absolutely mesmerized at the beauty of these capsules as they illuminated the nighttime sky of this coastline and their reflection upon the surface of this large ocean of water. And this is where the dream ended. As I mentioned earlier, I woke up the next morning remembering every detail of this dream. Due to the vividness and detailed storyline of the dream, I knew there was something very wrong about it in comparison to any other dream that I had ever had. The main thought that I had as a 10-year-old was how and why could God possibly use me in order to assist the so-called anointed Jehovah's Witnesses as they are being transported into heaven. At this particular point in my life, I had no understanding that salvation was made available through Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone. I had been programmed from birth to believe that I had to earn Jehovah's favor by loyally submitting to and serving in his so-called earthly organization. And in the end, there was still a chance that I would not have been successful at earning his approval, resulting in my ultimate destruction at Armageddon. After becoming a true Christian in the fall of 2001 at 30 years of age, God brought this dream back to my memory. Although I still did not completely understand the dream, as the Holy Spirit led and taught me, and as I grew in biblical knowledge, the revelation concerning the dream began to appear. Since creating this channel just over a year ago, God has revealed even more to me in regards to this particular dream. John chapter 8 and verse 12 tells us, "Then Jesus spoke to them again, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life." Jesus is still speaking in John chapter 12 and verse 46. "I have come as a light into the world, that whoever believes in me should not abide in darkness." Hebrews chapter 1 verses 1 through 3 reads, "God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in times past to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son, whom he has appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the world, who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power, when he had by himself purged our sins, sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high." Recall that in John 14 and verse 6, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Considering the fact that Jesus says that he is the light of the world and he is described as the radiance of God's glory, and since he is the only way by which we can be saved, it is very clear that this brightly illuminated capsule by which these people are being transported into heaven without question represents Jesus Christ. It is my responsibility as a Christian to share my testimony with others, explaining why I came to faith in Jesus Christ and chose to follow him for the rest of my life. The primary purpose of this channel is for me to share with you and anyone that has ears to hear the circumstances through which I became a true Christian and chose to leave a false religion behind me. This is my God-ordained responsibility as I and millions of my Christian brothers and sisters are manning our towers and sharing our faith with all who will listen.